Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on kind of where you guys are in your day. I put this together a couple hours ago and wanted to send it to Aubrey. This was kind of my last way of getting back at Matthew, that I got the opportunity to sit down and think about what I wanted to say and tape it and erase it and start over if I wanted. So it gets to come out a little bit more perfect than it would have if I was just going off the cuff. Anyway, my name is Thomas. I probably know some of you guys there. I don't know if you guys all know me. Knowing Matthew like I did and like we all kind of did, I kind of have the sense that maybe this is an eclectic group of folks. He seemed to collect people from different areas of the world. But for those that don't know me, my name's Thomas. My wife and I, Michelle, knew Matthew very well. For years, we lived over on Lump Gulch Road near Rollinsville. Had a few acres of land over there. A house that Matthew helped us pick out and keep going. And we both knew him very well for a number of years. Would count him among my best friends in my life. And I wanted to take a couple minutes to put some stuff together, to put some thoughts together for this. I really wish I could have been there today. I don't want to drag everybody into a really long story, but circumstances weren't really going to allow it. But I wish I could be there, especially where you guys are, and just to be there for Aubrey and to take this time to think about Matthew would be really special. A lot of folks don't maybe know this, but Matthew helped me almost buy the place where you guys are right now. About 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I guess. Michelle and I were considering buying that restaurant, and Matthew looked around and of course said we should. He was going to tear out that stairwell and increase the size of the kitchen, just in case the owners ever want an idea. That was Matthew's plan. Anyway, I first met Matthew when I was about 30 years old, long time ago. And I was the son of two professors, and I was raised by a man who thought it was better to earn a good living and to pay people to do things for themselves, to do things for you rather than to learn to do it themselves. And I moved up to the mountains, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was a complete mess. And I don't know why it all happened that way, but there's no way that I would have survived up there. I had no idea what I was doing. And the first time I met him, actually, I had broken a window in the house that I was renting. And I don't know if you guys can see me blushing in this, but I think it was the first fight that I'd ever had with my wife. And I threw a phone across the room and broke a window. Yeah, really, really proud moment for a 30-year-old. But it was kind of who I was at that point. And it smashed the window and it broke, and of course I didn't know what to do. And so I called somebody, and the next day Matthew showed up. And if anybody can think back on the first time that you met Matthew, there's no way that I believe that was what was going on. I'm like, you are not the person that is here to fix this. There's no one that is driving up in that vehicle that is looking like you look and is talking like you talk is here to actually fix something. There's just no way that this is true. And of course he showed up with a big smile on his face. And of course, he was instantly like, oh, this is no big deal. I'll have this fixed in no time. And just had such a positive attitude that, it was intoxicating. You couldn't think bad thoughts about him for very long, no matter how different he looked. And he showed up and he just fixed the window, and he didn't say anything. And then, a couple days later, he actually showed up again with a sledgehammer or a jackhammer to take out some big satellite that was there. And I remember coming outside, and he's got this jackhammer and he's going after this concrete slab that's holding up this big satellite. And I'm standing there for a second, and he turns it off, and he looks at me with a big smile on his face and sort of pushes it towards me. He's like, your turn. You want to try? And that was the first time that I'd ever operated a sledgehammer. And there's a lot of firsts with Matthews, but that was the thing, is like he would show up, and he would show up to do things, and those are the first couple times, and then for some reason he just kept showing up. And honestly, this is where it's good to be able to tape this and go back. I don't know why. I don't totally understand why he did it. I don't know what I did to deserve it, but he just attached himself to me, to us, and was bound and determined that we wouldn't quit, that we wouldn't fail. And he kept showing up. And it was really all throughout my life in Colorado. He helped us buy the house. He helped us pick out the house to buy, and it was a mountain house, so there was a million problems, right off the bat. The fireplace that they'd left in there was never going to work. We had plumbing problems. We didn't have enough heat at all in the house. Of course, we didn't have a freaking plow. Of course, we didn't have all this stuff that we were going to need, and we just bought the place and we didn't know what we're doing. And he would just show up, and it didn't really matter, like, if it was something we planned or something we were working on. Actually, some of the most important, some of the toughest moments are when we had those holy shit moments, where the plumbing goes out in the middle of the night, or the pump stops working, and I just don't know who to call or where to even start. And he would always just show up. Like, there was never any question. The only question is if he was done helping somebody else who had something more important or more catastrophic going on in their life than I did at that point. And as soon as he was able, as soon as he could, he showed up. And he showed up too, like, with such a good attitude, with such a pure heart, not asking for anything in return, just willing to give and willing to lean in and present this sense of calmness. Like, I remember getting back to our house one night, and there's like 3 inches of standing water in like the whole lower half of the house, and like, we got babies and stuff. I mean, the world is coming to an end, right? No, it's fine. You show up, you get a sump pump, you get the shop vac, just get the water out of there, no big deal. Carpet, gone, boom. We didn't like the carpet anyway. We'll put it in tile. I got a guy, and get some cheap stuff. It's great. There's nothing ever was a problem, nothing ever. And he just sort of brought that attitude to everything he did. And maybe that's what I'll remember the most about him, is that just, there was no way that you were ever gonna shake him or, scare him. Well, there's one way, but that's a story for another time. Yeah, it was the holy shit moments that he was always there for, and he always came in with this degree of calmness, and he just had this different perspective, on the whole world. I remember he helped us put in some radiant heating, and there's countless nights, but there was one night where it's probably the first night where this came up, where we're up in the attic and we're trying to install some pump and close off something and make sure everything worked right and stuff like that. And so we're testing things and sitting up there really for hours and sweating pipes and trying to get things to work. And, I'd been really thrown off by the whole process and wasn't sure what was going on and how to make it work and everything. And of course, Matthew was like, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And at one point, I sweated something and it actually worked and it held or something like that. And I think I said something along the lines of, oh, all right, maybe we can do this. It's not quite rocket science. and he went off. He's like, oh, what is rocket science? Smash mouth technology. Engineers don't know what they're doing. It just went on this diatribe about how rocket science wasn't really rocket science, and that the only thing that they were really doing was exploding some degree of fuel at the end of something and shooting something off in another direction. And here we are, in the crawl space of a house at 9,000 feet in the Rockies, and he's sitting there explaining to me how these guys that launch rockets to the moon are really not that smart. And he knows exactly what they're doing, and what we're doing is easy, but what they're doing is easy too, and it's just a matter of getting things done. It's such a great perspective, but then, like, he had, of course, all the intellectual capacity to know that what he was saying was actually right, and he could go through it, and he probably did in that time, and many more cases where he just sort of walk you through it and explain how Something that you thought was so obvious, and so linear was not actually like that, and that there was, I don't know, there's different ways of looking at it. Man. Yeah. Yeah. I was telling Aubrey, I heard a lot of stories from him, and so many of them. I so want to go back and watch that movie, Aubrey Big Fish. I haven't gotten a chance to watch it, but it's on my streaming list for today. I'll probably do that after the celebration. So many crazy stories. Like, we've all got them. Like, he's impossible to believe. It's not really possible that he existed. I did promise Aubrey I would tell a couple stories, though, because I think that as a man and an older man, there's a lot of stuff that I might have heard that maybe he didn't tell his children. You guys are probably going to have some stories to share like that, too. There's one in particular I was actually asking my kids, and my oldest remembered this story, too. There's one story he used to tell about being younger. And can you imagine, like, I met him when he was 60, and he had infinite amounts of energy, would go till whatever, all hours of the night. Can you imagine Matthew as a 30-year-old man? But when he was 30, he was telling the stories. When he was 30, he had a friend who was actually wilder than him. Okay, other thing you can't really imagine. Matthew as a 30-year-old, and then Matthew with a friend who was actually more wild than he was. But he and this guy used to go out in Nederland, and I guess this would have been like the 80s, and Ned was a different place in the 80s than it is now. And their thing to do on a Saturday night was to not actually drink, because that didn't really give Matthew much of a buzz. But they would go to the PI, and they would go to the back of the bar, and they would both order a beer, and then they would take their beer bottles and they would throw them towards the front of the room at somebody and just start a brawl. And the game was to start a brawl and then to see if they could actually get out of the PI without getting the shit kicked out of them. I promised Aubrey I would tell that story. There's a couple other ones that he's told me that I don't really know the audience there right now. They're PG-13 bordering on R that I can totally share. But there's so many impossible stories, and so many just bigger than life scenarios that he was involved with, and he would tell you these stories, but he was just so humble and so down to earth. Maybe that's why he looked the way he was. Maybe that's why it was hard to believe, but he was so honest and so sincere and so there for the situation, and so there for the people in his life. I've been reading this week this series of little devotionals on being a man in the world today, and it's an interesting topic for a lot of reasons, but I think to some degree we are losing track of kind of what it means to be a man. And one of the things that has struck me as I was trying to figure out what to say and how to do this, and listening to those, was there's so many characteristics that he had that are going away, that people need more of. And he was such a manly man. Like, he showed up, he was there for his people, he did what he knew how to do, and he did it the best he could all the time. It's an amazing individual, and I feel blessed that he chose us, that he continued to show up for us, that he attached himself to us when he didn't have to, and helped me. There's no way I would have survived in the mountains for 20 years without him. No way. Wouldn't have happened. And he was a part of our life, and thinking about those stories and listening to what people were talking about being a manly man and how gone that is from the world. I was struck, and this is probably the nicest thing that I could say about him, is that I have 3 children. I have 2 boys. One's 21 now and one's 18. And they both knew their grandfather, and they liked their grandfather. They loved their grandfather, and he meant a lot to them, and he taught them a lot. But they both knew Matthew as well, too, and I'm glad that they got to know Matthew, and I'm glad that they saw how he moved through the world, because there's some part of how he attacked the problems in front of him and how he dealt with it and how he took care of people and how he showed up for people that they saw and will always be an imprint on them. And I feel blessed that that they could have that as a memory. And that's probably the nicest thing that I could say to him. And wherever he is, I know you're watching, big man. And I know that you had an impression on us. But I told him this when I saw him last. It worked out so weirdly that I was actually passing through Colorado at the end of August and got a chance to see him right before he passed. And I drove up there and I told him, I was with Michael. Michael didn't come, my son, but we were on our way to Texas and I was dropping him off at college, and we were road tripping in a 1995 GMC Yukon that we had found and sort of helped put back together for Michael. And he smiled so big when he heard that was the car that we'd gotten for Michael. Oh, I'm choking up. So yeah. It's a worse world without you here, Matthew. Thank you for everything. Love you.